It's time to talk about Apple's earnings.
Money, 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 who has all the money? Money, 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 who has all the money? Money, 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 who has all the money? It's Apple.
Oh dear. This episode, man. I'm so pleased there was no bad
Summer of
news like this week.
fun!
Like we didn't have to talk
Oh my
about
God.
something really sad, Can you imagine? I guess we probably would have just changed.
Kicked it off a week, yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
here we go. Money, money, money. Who has all the money?
It's Apple.
It's Apple. Revenue of $85.8 billion for their fiscal third quarter in 2024. That is up 5% year over year. The
Yep.
Mac was at $7 billion of revenue, up 2%. The iPad at $7.2 billion, up 24%. Give it up.
Look what
for the
happens when you
iPad.
release a new product. What?
Imagine that.
Amazing.
The iPhone, $39.3 billion, down 1% year over year. Services at $24.2 billion, up 14%. We'll talk about that in a minute. And wearables and home, $8.1 billion, down 2%. So, not a lot going on here, really.
No. What my standard line is, it is the most boring quarter possible that sets a quarterly revenue record and throws off more than $20 billion in profit. But that's Apple right now. It is a mostly boring report where they made huge sums of money, bought a lot of stock back, did a big dividend, set a Q3 record, which, they set it by a little tiny bit, and Q3 is not a very interesting quarter for them, but still, it's a record. It's the most revenue they've ever had in the third fiscal quarter. Most of their product line was just sort of like up a little tiny bit or down a little tiny bit, and Apple would even tell you that the iPhone being down 1%, actually, if in constant currency, it grew. It was just the strong dollar meant some of that went down. Anyway, a fairly standard Apple machine continues rolling kind of quarter.
Well, this is the thing, though. You got to find your story, right? There's always a story in the earnings somewhere, and you found it, I think. You wrote just an excellent article about
thank you.
services. It's actually an article where, really, to talk about it, I just have to quote big chunks of it because you make a lot of good points. So, this is from Jason Snell of sixcolors.com. Over the last 3 years, Apple has averaged a 72% profit margin on services revenue. Even if a quarter of the services revenue that Apple receives is just payments from Google, and a further portion is Apple taking its cut from App Store transactions, there's still a lot more going on here. Apple is building an enormous business that's based on Apple customers giving the company their credit cards and charging them regularly. And that business is incredibly profitable and is expected to continue growing at double-digit percentages. So what I found interesting here is that you made a point and then made its counterpoint, like in the article, right? You're talking about the fact that Apple, a ton of this money is from Google, a ton of this money is from App Store stuff, and Apple's making its TV shows. But if you took those out, that's still a huge amount of money. So they are kind of doing all of it and doing well.
Yeah, they're building this business where what they want is to make more ongoing money on their existing customer base. That's the goal, is they're going to offer additional services, and then also they're making money via, again, the Google licensing deal and via a cut of App Store transactions, although you could argue that the App Store transactions fit in because it's a service Apple is providing, an App Store, and then they get a cut of that too. And leaving aside the monopoly questions there, it's still, I think, even if there could be other app stores, Apple would still do pretty well offering its own app store as the platform owner. And I also I didn't want people reading this article to spend the length of the article going, but what about Google? Right? Yes, Google generates whatever it is. It's a very large number of amount of money.
$40 billion a year, I think.
I think it's more. I think it's like $20 billion a year.
Okay.
But regardless, it's a lot. It's a lot. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff too, and Apple rolls it all together.
20. You're right. I found it. $20 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like less than a quarter of Apple's overall services revenue at this point, which probably when it started it was almost all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's not. It's less than a quarter of Apple, because this was 25 billion in one quarter.
Yeah.
And it's about 20 billion a year from Google. So a fraction, an important fraction that's 100% profit, but still a fraction.
Yeah. And the key thing being the services revenue grows quarter to quarter. It's not just year on year.
It does.
And like you look at that chart, and it just keeps going up. It just keeps going up.
I think Apple has set a services revenue record, something like 15 out of the last 16 quarters or 15 out of the last 17 quarters. There was a little bump where they kind of came back down a little bit.
Q3 and Q4 of 2022 went down a little. Other than that, it was basically up the whole time.
It's been up for like 5 years.
Yeah,
I think probably. So it's profitable, it's growing, and Apple said on the call they expect it to continue growing at double-digit percentages like that for next quarter. So yeah, it's a huge business, and it's not just Google, and it's not just App Store. It is a whole big lump of money, and of course, the other part of this. So there's two bits of. I had a little buzzing in my head. I was like, what's going on here, right? I'm looking at this. I'm thinking I'm going to write something about the Apple results. It was a really boring quarter in the most. Again, I would love to have a boring quarter like that where I generate $20 billion in profit and set a record. But still, for Apple, kind of a boring quarter. And I was thinking, like, well, what is in here? And two things hit me. And one of them was the basic math of $24.4 billion in services revenue is more than the Mac, iPad, and wearables, home and accessories categories generated. Right? So already, if you look at the pie chart, like there's iPhone, which is big, and then there's services, and then there's everything else, wearables, Mac, and iPad, and they're not as big as services. So services is now eclipsed all but the iPhone of Apple's product category.
That's wild.
It's just a huge business for them, and that's
the
revenue,
other thing
right?
that you made a good chart for this. That the profit figure.
Yes. So. That's the other penny that dropped then. Yeah. I'm like, okay. I like, all right, so that's impressive. It's bigger than Mac, iPad, and wearables put together. But keep in mind, Apple's profit margin on services revenue, I did the math, over the last 3 years, it's 72%. And, Apple makes really good profit on its hardware, but it's nothing like that because it can't be, because hardware costs. It has fixed costs of every iPhone costs to manufacture, it costs all the parts and all of that. Services is a lot lighter because it's sort of intangible, and there are costs, but 72% profit margin. And if you do the math based on the profit margins in the last quarter, what you end up getting is how much profit did Apple's products make, including the iPhone, and how much profit, the bottom line here, we're not talking the top line, we're talking the bottom line, profit from products versus profit from services. And the answer is, I did a little chart, $22 billion in profit from products and $18 billion from services. So products still more profitable for Apple than services, but it's close. Yeah. And I would guess that in the next year, there will be at least one quarter where Apple makes more of its profit from the services line than from all of its products, including the iPhone, it's put together.
Probably the earliest it would be Q3 25.
2 or 3, right? Because it's not going to be the holiday quarter. There's a huge spike in product revenue. It's on the chart. You can see it. But we're getting to that point. So it's just an interesting thing to think about. And again, a lot of people leapt to conclusions based on this. It was very interesting to see. It was like a little Rorschach test where some people are saying, you're saying that Apple shouldn't make money on services. And there are other people who are like, yes, this is why Apple is doomed and has sold its soul because of this. It's like, I'm not saying either of those things. I'm saying, isn't this an interesting fact that colors how we think about how Apple's business is put together? That's really, I'm really not going beyond that. In fact, in the story, one of the things I said, trying to reason this out, is the truth is anyone who has a runaway services narrative, I think is probably wrong. The danger is that there ends up being people at Apple who don't understand and have misunderstood the business. And I hope they're never put in positions of authority, because it's obvious that services is a revenue stream built on the back of Apple's hardware. And that if there is no iPhone, there is no services revenue. You can't have one without the other. It starts with the hardware. The hardware matters. The hardware and software bundled together in that device. It matters. What Apple has done, though, is said, when we sell you an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad, we're not just selling you that product and making a profit on it. We are also then selling you services that make you even more, to the point where I don't think there's necessarily an existential crisis going on, but I think it's very quickly becoming true that, when somebody buys an iPhone, Apple makes a lot of money, but maybe not as much money as they make over the life of that iPhone on the services sold to that person.
I think services, like if we're just being completely kind to Apple, services make so much sense to them as a company, because they have spent the last 25 years especially building an ecosystem, right? That you want to have 4 products of theirs and you're going to have a great time. Services is the glue between all of them, right? That actually connects the multiple products that you have of theirs together. So really, like services, the idea of things in the cloud and the connection of these devices, like that's kind of the proposition, right? That you can have 4 things of theirs, and they all kind of work similarly, and you get the same service and the same features across all of these devices. So, like, if you just take it at its face value of what we like about Apple and the way that Apple's products work, services makes a lot of sense. The problem is everything that gets dumped into services, right? Some of that stuff, not so good.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think what Apple has tried to do with services is say, look, when they say hardware and software and services now, instead of just hardware and software, I think what they're getting at is what you said. It's the glue. It's the idea that, look, one advantage is that our hardware is great and the software that runs on it. Another advantage is then we build services that improve your usage of those products, make them work better together, improve, these are key products in your life, and we can build services that elevate it further.
Yep.
And let's be honest, are also easier. Like the thing I always think about, like Apple Retail. Like Apple Retail is incredibly profitable. There are other retail outlets. This is why I'm not super enthusiastic about the idea of everything when Apple does a thing, it's a monopoly play. Because like there are other retail outlets, but it's sure convenient to go to the Apple Store because that it's Apple, it's nice. They're going to have everything. They're going to have people there, and even if that's not entirely true, like I think that's the vibe you get. I'm going to Apple. I'm going to I hear a lot of people say I'm going to Apple. When I say I'm going to Apple, I mean I'm driving to Cupertino. Yes. But a lot of people I'm going to Apple means I'm going to the mall, right? I'm going to Apple. And Apple has everything. And if they don't have it, they can get it. And they're the experts and they know all about it. And it's convenient, and there's third-party products in the Apple Store, and they're not cheap, but it's certainly easy. And again, could you save money by doing this elsewhere and buying different products that aren't in the Apple retail store and all that? Yes, but it's super convenient to just be in the Apple retail store, so they make a lot of money from it. And I think services is the same kind of story where, like we have on these podcasts, we talk about this, and on my website and all that, like, okay, cloud storage. Google makes cloud storage. Microsoft has cloud storage. There's Dropbox. There's Box. There's all of these things. And there's iCloud. Does iCloud have issues? Yeah, not as many as it used to. Mm-hmm. Does iCloud have all the features of those other things? No, it doesn't. Is iCloud easy because it's built into the operating system and you're already giving Apple money for something else? Yeah, it really is. And that goes for all of this stuff. So I think that's ultimately their game. And I don't think it's fundamentally evil. I think it's actually perfectly reasonable, which is we're going to make this thing that is a little pricey and very profitable for us, but it's going to make our products nicer and it's easy for you to do it. And you know what? There are always going to be coupon clippers out there, and there are always people who are going to be like, no, I've cobbled together a system that saves me $8 a month, and take that, Apple. It's like, okay, that's fine. In fact, I would argue that's where Apple's anti-competitive nature is like, let those people do that. Just let them do that. That's fine. Because most people, it goes back to like when Steve Jobs said, we're going to start selling music on iTunes, right? It's like, people are downloading music for free. Like, you can get Napster and get music for free. But you know what? You just pay 99 cents for a song. It's easy. It's right there. It's convenient. And a lot of people are like, that's fine. I'll do that. So convenience goes a long way. Having it be from Apple and deeply integrated goes a long way. I know there are anti-competitive arguments that can be made there, but like in the big picture, I think that's really what's going on with services is like they just want, like they've got these products and then there's this big warm fuzzy cloud around all of them that is Apple services, and they're nice and they're easy, and before you know it, Apple is extracting huge amounts of money out of your bank account every month. It happens to all of us.
I mean, it's to kind of wrap this up, it is kind of incredible that they made the services thing work.
Yeah, I looked it up. It was 7 or 8 years ago that they did the services narrative thing, right? Where they're like, okay, hey, everybody, we are announcing today that we're going to make a big bet on our services revenue, and we're going to double it in the next, I forget what it was, 5 years or whatever. They doubled it so much faster than that. And they knew they were going to do that, but it was the launching of the services narrative, which is we as a company. So this is not new, right? This is 8 years since they announced it. So probably longer that they were workshopping it internally. We are going to grow our services business. We are not going to stand. And I think some of this is Apple wanting all the money and it's on its platform. I think that's a thing that is a not great bit of Apple's personality as a corporation, but it's this idea of like, well, wait a second. Why are other people building businesses on connecting all these things and offering services to our users? Why don't we do that? And so they set about building an enormous services business. And as you said, the funny thing is it worked in, I think, beyond their wildest expectations. It worked.
Because then also the industry moved in such a way that they were able to collect up more pieces and put them into services. Like when they started this, they didn't think they were going to make a TV show with Jennifer Aniston in it. Like that wasn't what they were thinking about.
No, that was probably not what they were thinking. No. And again, that Apple TV Plus loses money, right? Like that's a real hit to the profit margin. It loses money, but I think again, it's got some other benefits that we talked about. They really like being nominated for awards and things like that. It adds a sheen to it.
I would
also say it adds a sheen to the services line.
Yes,
because it's much more glamorous to talk about services and say, we got a lot of Emmy nominations than it is to say, we got another big check from Google. So